All right, greetings to you all. My name is Caroline Player, and on behalf of the Georgia Tech Alumni Association, I welcome you to this segment of our Career Conversations webinars. It is my pleasure to tell you a little bit about our speaker to get started. Hallie Crawford is a certified career coach, speaker, and author from Atlanta whose coaching company, HallieCrawford.com, helps people identify their career path, navigate career transition, and nurture their careers. Her team of coaches works with people of all ages. They have clients worldwide and have helped thousands of people achieve their career goals. Hallie's passionate about helping others because she took the same journey to find her own satisfying career and purpose in life. She knows firsthand the challenges that arise during career transition and has practical solutions to make that process successful. She's been in coaching since 2002 and has an undergrad and grad degrees from Vanderbilt and the University of Illinois at Chicago. She has served on the board of the Georgia Coach Association and is regularly featured as a career expert in the media, including in CNN, Fox Business News, The Wall Street Journal, U.S. News and World Report, and Forbes.com. When she's not helping clients one-on-one, Hallie coaches small groups through virtual teleclasses and regularly holds speaking engagements and career workshops. She lives, as we said, in Atlanta with her son, Vaughn. When she's not working, she loves horseback riding, traveling, and living by the motto, the greatest risk in life is not taking one. So I'm just about to turn the program over, Overcoming the Impostor Syndrome, to Hallie, but by means of housekeeping, our presentation is going to be about 40 to 45 minutes. We'll open up the floor for questions and comments at that point. We're going to use the chat function, and that chat bubble is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You'll just chat to myself or to Hallie directly to ask any questions or make comments. If you happen to find yourself not on mute, I've tried to do that for the entire audience, just click on the microphone to mute yourself to avoid any outstanding background noise, and we would certainly appreciate it. So without further delay, Hallie, let me turn this over to you.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm so excited to be here. And the housekeeping items are important. I find with webinars, the background noise is distracting, and there's all these different buttons you and I need to push and all of that. So that's perfect. I am especially excited about this topic because I actually had not heard of the imposter syndrome until I would say about 6 months ago or so. So I find it very interesting, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today, and thank you in advance for your time on your lunch hour too. So let's dive right in. So like I said, this is kind of a new concept for me, but when I learned about this is me on the far left here. When I was 25, I was living in my mother's basement, and my confidence was really low. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life and my career direction, and I think the only thing that really I had going on for me at that time was this cute Halle Berry haircut. But I have to be honest with you all, once I learned more recently about the imposter syndrome, I realized that, I feel this often, even today. So I felt that way when I was younger, but still do at age 42. I feel this frequently, and my mom, who lives here in Atlanta, which is fantastic, she will give me advice sometimes about this. And I'll say to her, wow, that's really good. Where did you hear that? And she tells me, I heard it from someone really smart. I read it on your blog. And I would say about 30% of the time, at least, I have this sense of having the imposter syndrome. And it's hard for me as well because I work at home. I have a home office, alone as well, and sometimes those negative thoughts for us can feed on us even more when we're working alone, as an example. So I just want you to know I totally understand this phenomenon for myself as well. And here's the deal. I have this great website. We just launched it last fall. But sometimes I make mistakes in my business. And there are these voices in my head every once in a while that says, you're not as great a business owner as you look. If I don't know an answer for a client like right away, I feel bad, like something's wrong. And honestly, everyone, we get kudos all the time on our services. We have a great reputation, our brand is strong, but still, I can have this sense of having the imposter syndrome too. So no matter how successful you are, or anyone is, I really feel like this can happen to us sometimes. And Carolyn, I don't want to totally put you on the spot, but does this ever happen to you at all where you've got these negative thoughts?
Absolutely, especially as you said, Hallie, when an answer or a question comes up that you don't immediately have the answer for, and you start to question, why don't I know that? If you know it's coming in my realm as a career services professional, why don't I have the experience to have that answer immediately on the tip of my tongue? So I definitely understand where you're coming from, and have experienced it myself.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, because I know, I mean, this is a really personal thing, and it's hard to admit that we have this. And I'll tell you all, and this is one of the things, kind of the clues that you might be suffering from this, so to speak, is I frequently will attribute, if someone gives us kudos on our work or, you know, at a workshop or whatever, I frequently will attribute it to luck, or, oh, I just got lucky with my business, or, oh, the audience was great and gave great feedback, instead of owning what I did successfully and well during that time. And so this is what we have to be mindful of, everyone, when you attribute your success to something outside of you. So on this next slide here, I want you to just take a moment here to write down, or, you know, on your computer or whatever works, is what is your experience? If you think about the imposter syndrome, and I'll define it a little bit more here in a moment, but in terms of you not attributing your own success to your talents and skills or something that you did well, just write this down for a moment. So what does this feel like for you? How have you experienced this? You can write down just a couple of things. And also write down for yourself how often this might happen. And I find this is really important because the first step, just like anything else, is awareness, right? So we first need to be aware of, okay, do I suffer from this? What happens to me, or how do I experience this? What are the results that occur? And how often is this? Is this a big problem, or is it something smaller? Okay? So just write that down for me for a moment for that self-reflection and awareness. And here's what we're going to talk about today while you're thinking and writing that down. So we're going to define the imposter syndrome. We're going to talk about the impacts, the feelings and actions behind it, which I just asked you to start thinking about. We're going to talk about tools to managing and obviously some action steps. And Caroline, I'm curious from you before we get to the next slide, do you ever see this in alum that you work with, whether or not they call it this? Do you ever see this kind of phenomenon, this type of thing?
Yes, I do think, especially as people are transitioning into new jobs and new areas, having that perfect competency to get the job done, but having some unknowns especially sort of sparks this sort of have lack of confidence in what they really do know.
Yeah, and like it's just a sense of unease or uncertainty. So that's actually a really good point. If we can digress here for a second, because I thought of a client example as well, is if you're in transition specifically, this can come up enormously. The other time I can think of it, I was just talking to a client this week about this, and she had a really bad work experience in her past, and it was years ago, everybody. It was a long time ago, but it still shapes how she feels about herself. She has this syndrome, so to speak, pretty intensely. She's constantly feeling like, you know, she's not as successful or qualified as you know, other people think she is and know she is, as they tell her, because she had a bad experience with a boss a long time ago who was somewhat abusive to her and was, you know, deflated her confidence, and to this day, it affects her. So keep this in mind, everyone, too. You may have had a past experience, whether it's personal or professional, that could impact this and cause you to have this trouble, too. So think about that as well. Sometimes thinking about the root cause and looking at a past experience like that is helpful, because in this client's you know, example, it had nothing to do with her. The boss was very difficult and actually was reprimanded and eventually fired. So it was clearly had nothing to do with my client. Okay? So just keep that in mind. So let's talk about the definition for a moment. And Caroline, feel free to jump in here if you see any other or think of any other, you know, ways to define or piggyback on this. So Wikipedia, we love, you know, it's easy peasy. So the imposter syndrome is defined as a psychological phenomenon where people they just can't internalize their accomplishments. Like there's kind of like a barrier in them being able to do that. And if you look here on the slide, some people feel like they're frauds and don't deserve the success they've achieved. This is something that I experience sometimes, like I talked about before. And sometimes people will feel like, oh, it was just luck, or I got a break, like I happened to be in the right place at the right time, instead of saying it's about my talents and skills. And this is not about everybody walking around tooting your own horn all the time and being overly confident. It's not about that. This is more of an underlying phenomenon that happens to us where we don't internalize these things, don't allow us to be confident. And as a result, we may not speak up in a meeting, or we might not ask for that raise or promotion that we actually deserve, okay? And the only last thing I want to say about this is, I think it's a psychological thing. Obviously, it's not as intense as some other psychological issues people can have. Think about this, everyone, in terms of your professional development and your progress, and simply as like a negative voice in your head. That's one of the best ways to kind of think about it, that doesn't allow you to internalize your success, speak about yourself as confidently as you might need to, okay? So think about it in that way.
I completely agree with you on that, Holly. Sorry to interrupt, but it can be as simplistic just from the little bit we've talked about it, and what I've read as a result of you bringing this topic up is it can be as simplistic as a little nagging in your head that just says, don't speak up in a meeting because this isn't, you know, your expertise. And it just makes that one instant, in that one instant you feel less valuable, rather than it being constant, you know, a feeling of foreboding that you don't contribute. So it can be a wide range, don't you think, of how this can affect you as an individual?
Yes, and that's a really good point, and that's kind of, yeah, what I was saying before is it's a big deal, but yeah, it's not like you are walking around all the time in fear. It can be a short, simple thing, but it can make a difference over time, like you're saying. If you continuously don't speak up in meetings, you know, people aren't going to understand your value and see you as a confident person. So, yeah, that's exactly right. And the more we can just be aware of and mindful of what these are, then we can just push past that, you know, in that moment. So I think that's a great way to frame it. Thanks for saying that.
Sure.
So this is an article, everyone. And by the way, you will be getting the slides. The full slide deck, and I think it's a recording, right, with the audio.
Yes.
Good. Of the presentation today, so don't feel like you have to be frantically writing down these really long, you know, URLs there. But there was a really interesting article in Inc. magazine, and it specifically talked about entrepreneurs, but there was a story about this guy, Bud Stockwell. I think he was in the Northwest, owns a very large health food store. And this was one of the quotes. He received an award from an association out there, and he said this. And so I want to point out too that this affects both men and women. And this is what he said. He didn't feel like he deserved the award. And look, he goes right away to, you know, saying everyone else because, you know, it's the location, which is luck, or the stats. And now there's nothing wrong. As we know, we want to give, you know, our teams credit. It's not about taking credit all for ourselves. But I think what's interesting to notice for you all is, what is your first reaction? So when someone, and think about this, okay, this can be an additional homework assignment. Think about when someone gives you a compliment at work, what is your first reaction? Do you own it and say a simple, thank you, I really appreciate that? Or is your first reaction to be like, oh, no, it was all these other people? So think about and notice that even in the next week, everyone. How do you accept or take compliments, and what's your first reaction to them? Does that make sense, Caroline?
It does. It definitely does.
Okay, so you just want to notice that. And I liked this article about it because, especially with entrepreneurs, we tend to think, and usually, you know, I think this is the case, that they're these uber confident people that are willing to take these risks, but it can impact them as well. Okay? All right, so let's get to the next slide. So here are some stats about the imposter syndrome. And when I did a presentation on this, I believe it was last summer, it was really interesting because I surveyed the room of how many people felt like they, you know, had this issue. Every single person in the room raised their hand, and they all had different examples from, you know, I have a boss who doesn't seem to value my my talents and skills or my education, and they value other people more. Maybe they value some men on the team versus women, or just in general. And it was just interesting to me because there were so many different examples of how this plays out for them. And one of the things I want you all to pay attention to and notice is how sometimes certain people in our lives and certain situations can bring this out in us. So like one woman said her boss brought it out in her and just how he treated her. Another woman said, every time before I go to a conference, I'm really nervous, but also feel like I don't deserve to be there and I don't have the knowledge. And so you need to pay attention, everyone, to the situation, perhaps, or the person that may kind of press this button, if you will, because that will help you understand when and where this typically comes up for you, and then you can be kind of armed and prepared. Does that make sense, Caroline?
It does. It definitely does.
Okay. So here are some quick stats about this. So 2 out of 5 successful people consider themselves frauds. I feel like, I can't honestly say, and there were not statistics about, executives suffer from this more versus another group. But the general stats were 70% of people feel like this, like an imposter at one time or another. So it's enough that we need to pay attention to and address it, because like we were saying before, at key critical moments in your career, it can have an impact, and you might not take that step out that you need to. When I was researching and prepping for today, there are a few books that I'd like to just share with you and recommend, and then we'll start talking about the impact and what happens as a result of this. But these are some books I recommend regarding the imposter syndrome. The one I like best is on the top left here, Taming Your Gremlin. This one is in general. It's not just specific to imposter syndrome per se, but it's a great, quick, easy read about how to manage those negative thoughts in your head and those voices. I use it with my coaching clients all the time. It basically talks about your gremlin is the negative inner voice in your head, and they say all different things, so we can have multiple gremlins. And this is one of the quickest, easiest ways I think you can start to deal with these. And then there's some other books here on the right-hand side from Amazon that if you feel you need to dive into this more, it can give you some resources here. But it was interesting to me because I didn't find a ton on this. I think it's kind of a newer, slightly newer phenomenon where it hasn't been as highly researched as it could be, and probably will be over time, okay? All right, so here are basically the 3 categories, so to speak, of the imposter syndrome. So just as a reminder, like we've been talking about, awareness is a first huge step, okay? The first thing we need to do is be aware of what's going on, and the Taming Your Gremlin book emphasizes this enormously, where it's like, first, write down the scenarios or situations where you feel like this happens. Write down how you feel in the moment and write down the results. So the 3 basic categories, if you will, of imposter syndrome are feeling like a fake, like we've talked about, attributing your success to luck, and discounting your success in general, not giving yourself credit. I have a quick example I wanted to share with you. I had a client, Beth, who's actually here in Atlanta. She did not have a college degree, and I did not know this until months after working with her because she did not want to admit it. She was a marketing director at a very large corporation, well-known here in Atlanta, and she had all of these categories, feeling like a fake, feeling like it was luck, etc. And she felt like she wasn't as talented as others thought she was, especially since she didn't have a college degree, which would make her feel like she was a fake. It would fall into that first category. And she would also say to me, oh, well, I got some lucky breaks along the way. Like I had bosses who liked me and promoted me, and it was more like it was because they liked her as opposed to they valued her talent. And as a result, she would continuously discount her success, not tell people she didn't have a degree, which I understand to a certain extent, but it really had a big impact on her mentally. After we coached together, because she was in career transition wanting to make a change, she fortunately got over it, worked on this enormously, and landed a huge promotion in Chicago. And ended up, it was such a great opportunity for her. She moved her whole family up to Chicago after working here in Atlanta. So I just want you to get that this can really, I really think this held her back for years in her, previous position. And once you can lift this, you can really shoot forward enormously in your professional development. Caroline, are there any examples that you can think of specifically of people? It doesn't have to be, just curious.
Let me give that some thought. Nothing comes to mind right off the top, but I will give that some thought and interject later.
Yeah, I think the career transition piece is really critically important in terms of a situation where this can come out. So that's perfect. Right. All right. So next slide. So let's talk about the impact, okay? And I want you all to get out your pens again or write on your computer, whatever's best for you, about what the impact is on you. Okay, so we've talked about some scenarios already, situations, well, I don't speak up in a meeting, or I don't ask for a raise or a promotion, or I get really nervous speaking at a conference. And here's the deal, everyone. If you look at this slide, we always interview or, ask our prospective clients, what gets in your way? And when we're working with them through coaching, what are your biggest obstacles to success, whether it's work performance or making a career transition, whatever it is. 9 times out of 10, hands down, they tell us they are their biggest obstacle. It's not their boss. It's not some external thing. They own and realize when they're really forced to think about this that it's me. I'm my biggest obstacle, whether it's my negative thoughts or something else, okay? So I want you to just start to write down and think about, okay, where do you think you hold back? Is it in meetings? Is it in talking with your boss and touting, your experience or expertise or something you did really well on a project, okay? And let's go to the next slide. And what are the results, okay? So look on the right-hand side. These are the possible results of having this imposter syndrome. Not applying for a job in the first place. This happens to our clients frequently where they'll be researching career ideas and they're like, well, not qualified for any of these that look appealing to me, and they don't want to apply. Understandably, they don't feel confident. But when we look at and talk about their transferable skills and I take a look at their resume for them, we realize that, wait a minute, there are so many ways they're actually qualified for the job. Caroline, do you see this with people too?
Absolutely. In fact, I think of, looking at job descriptions with clients, and they may be qualified for 95% or have previously done something very similar to 95% of that job description that they're interested in, but then they let the 5%, a very small percentage of the job that they may not have been exposed to in prior jobs, really overshadow that entire body of work that they bring to the table. So that is definitely one way that a small thing brings about a lot of doubt.
Yeah, totally. And when you look at transferable skills, everyone, a lot of times you're actually more qualified than you think you are. If you look here on the bottom just real quick where I talk about pairs, it's a great idea, everyone, to talk with a supportive friend or family member or coworker or whomever after this webinar today. Pair up with them for a few minutes and talk with them about the results and the negative impact you experience, to have them help you brainstorm, okay, this is what happens and what could you do about it. So it's just the power of, 2 heads are better than 1. So I wanted to suggest that as a homework assignment. So if we go back to the right-hand side here, people might not apply for a promotion. They might not submit a paper to a conference or journal, whatever it is. They'll understate their experience or skill sets. And as a result, what I find is people who have this difficulty experience a higher level of stress. Because a lot of times, if you look at the very bottom here, and one of the people in the workshop that I did recently talked about how she is such a perfectionist, in part related to this or because of it, that she is constantly over-preparing for tasks, doing much more than she needs to, and she can't stop herself. It's hard to do that. And that can lead to that higher stress as well. So it's a problem for all of these different reasons, and I'm sure you all can come up with additional ones as well, okay? All right, so let's take a look at the next slide. And we're going to have a lot of time, I think, for Q&A here at the end. And Caroline, what I wanted to suggest that we do too is you and I can share possible tools to manage and brainstorm ideas. But I'd love for you all on the call today to use the chat box and let us know, A, how you experienced this, What's the impact for you? But then B, what are some of the tools that you've used to manage so we can kind of work together a little bit as a group to come up with unique and interesting ideas? So one of the things I wanted to share with you all, though, is there's a great article about this topic, and it gives you some additional tools to manage the imposter syndrome. So take a look at this afterwards. And actually, this helps you, this link here with the PDF, this will help you identify if you have it and how often. And one of the things I would suggest for you is to have a journal for a day. This is one of the things I tell clients as a tool to start managing the imposter syndrome and their gremlins, is get a journal and just for one full day at work but also personally, write down all the negative thoughts or fears that come to your mind. And what I have found is when clients do this, even if it's just for half a day, because a day seems too long and maybe there would be too many, even if it's just for half a day, what clients will realize and see is they are saying this, having these negative thoughts or saying these negative things to themselves, A, much more frequently than they realize, but B, they're saying the same things over and over. So what I want you all, kind of the good news here, what I want you to get is that typically when people have this negative thinking going on, it's not 20 different things they're saying that you're going to now have to manage. It's usually the same one or two things, and it's just like a broken record over the course of the day. I know that happens to me. It's usually the same couple of things, okay? You want to identify and manage that negative thinking, and I think journaling about it can help you with that awareness, obviously. Remembering that a single mistake that you make during the course of the day does not reflect upon your abilities at all. And one of the things that you can do, and we'll move to action items, so let me switch the slide here for just a second, is let's talk about some tools to manage and brainstorm. Caroline, you and I together can talk about this. And then I encourage you all to talk with friends and family about it. And then on the next slide, we're going to give you some ideas as well about how to manage it, okay? So first of all, one of the things you can do to help manage this better is to shift your thinking, okay? And at the end of each day, instead of, oh, you know, I didn't accomplish as much as I wanted to or whatever it is, write down the 2 or 3 things you did accomplish. So this can also be a journaling exercise, okay? So instead of focusing on the negative, focus on the positive. Because one of the things that is helpful for this imposter syndrome and our negative thoughts is to change our thinking and kind of reprogram our brain in order to think in a positive way, okay? And let me switch to this slide really quickly too so you can see. These are some of the ways that my client Beth worked towards improving her confidence. So get your pens out here, see if any of these are going to be good for you, and I'll walk through these with you too. One of the things, so a second possible tool is, it comes straight from the book, Taming Your Gremlin. Once you identify what these negative voices are saying to you, like, oh, you didn't get enough done today, or oh, you know, you're not as skilled or accomplished as you think you are, come up with what you can say instead back to that gremlin. And I know this might sound kind of crazy, everybody, but in the book they talk about kind of personifying these negative inner voices in order to be more objective about them. So what you need to do when you identify, you know, these feelings is bring them kind of outside of you so that you can observe them and be their observer rather than their victim. Caroline, does that make sense?
It does make sense, absolutely.
Okay. And you can even think to yourself, okay, that was this thing that crazy career coach Hallie was talking about, you know, the other day. Like, the more you bring it outside of yourself, everyone, the sooner and more effectively you can manage it. And then,
I really think you can determine how reasonable you're being when you personify it, right? Instead of letting things just magnify in your head, how reasonable am I being when I put this thought that I'm having on, you know, in a person versus in just a wild thought in my head.
Yeah, and the wild thought that can just take over everything, right?
Right.
Yep. So it helps you get a handle on it quickly and be rational about it, everyone. And even it's okay to say to yourself, okay, hold on. Yes, I am not that great in this area. Like, you need to take out the element of truth in what it's saying, if there is one, Like, yes, I need to beef up these skills, but that does not mean I'm terrible at my job overall. I had like these other 10 skills. You see what I'm saying, everyone? So it will help you by personifying it like that. It will help you be more objective and rational about what's going on too. So that's perfect. And then the third step that they talk about in the Taming Your Gremlin book is say something back to it. Push it aside. I've had clients, it sounds funny, but they'll like smash it with their fist if they're in their office, or they'll just blow past it and focus on something else. So the more actively you can manage that gremlin, whether it's talking back to it or something different, the better off you will be. You don't want to give it a lot of energy, everyone, because then you'll just kind of build it up even more. You want to just say, not thinking about that now and focusing on something else, or talk back to it and say, that's one thing I didn't do well today. I did 10 other things incredibly well. End of story, okay? So in order to improve your confidence, here are some other ideas, everyone, and this will help you manage this imposter syndrome. These are some examples that helped and worked with client Beth that I talked about before, okay? So one of the things you could do to help improve your confidence, just from an overall kind of big picture perspective, is you can interview others. Ask them, what do you see are my greatest skills and strengths? This is a great boost, especially from people who are really supportive and know you well. So go ahead and interview 2 or 3 people. And by the way, this is not just helpful for your confidence, but it's a great way to better understand your professional brand and how you come across, okay? Another thing you can do that is kind of along the lines that we just talked about is to write down affirmations. So in some cases, you can say an affirmation back to the gremlin. You can have an affirmation that you say to yourself in the morning that you know specifically hits that one place where you tend to hide out because of the imposter syndrome. I always suggest these affirmations are done multiple times during the day, but specifically first thing in the morning. So it could be something you do in the morning, getting ready for work, at lunch, and maybe at the end of the day, kind of built it around your existing schedule. But it's much easier, everyone, to set the tone at the beginning of the day in the right way than to wrangle it back when it's already not in the right tone later. So in the morning is fantastic. Another thing that I have clients do, if you look at number 3 here, is to write down all of your accomplishments since childhood. It kind of sounds funny, but when I have clients do this, it's hugely helpful for them because then they're looking at, look at all the stuff I've accomplished, even since they were a kid, and it's kind of fun to reflect back on those things. Another way to build your confidence is number 4, taking small risks every day. So this is what Caroline was talking about earlier, like you might not speak up in a meeting. Speak up, push past this fear, this concern, whatever it is. Talk to someone new at the grocery store, whatever it is, wherever you tend to hide out. Take a small risk in that area. And my point is, everyone, that risk is a muscle that we need to work out and develop regularly in order for it to be strong for us. So you need to do this on a consistent basis, A, and B, it does not have to be that you have to go skydiving in order to build your confidence. It can be small things that you do on a more consistent basis. So just to push yourself outside your comfort zone. And then the last piece here, number 5, is, and I have to tell you guys this, it's very compelling and effective with my clients when I talk to them about how are you sitting at meetings. Are you sitting up and straight, forward, and engaged, or in some other way? So play with your body posture and your physical position at work, if you will, and how you're sitting and whether it makes you feel more confident or not. And I'll tell you, I'll be on a call with someone and I'll say, okay, shift your body to emulate what a confident person would be sitting or standing like, whatever it is. And when they do it, they feel better right away. So physical movement can be a critical piece to our learning in this area. So I don't want you to discount that either, okay? Caroline, any other thoughts on action steps?
And I'd say, see if you agree with me, Hallie, on the taking small risks every day. I think in general, we have to help ourselves along with that sort of thing and do the things that are going to make us be more likely to take those next steps. For example, with me, if I find myself in a specific group where I'm intimidated to speak on the subject, perhaps before a meeting on that, I'll write down a few items that I know that I'd like to cover myself. I have some insight on or a question about, so that that will help compel me in the situation of a meeting that I'm finding somewhat intimidating to move forward with that risk. So I would encourage you all, make it easier on yourselves too, and do those little small things perhaps in advance. And I'm not advocating, as Hallie said before, so much over preparation that you're just wearing yourself out and stressing yourself out. But on the other hand, if you can do some small things that are going to hold yourself accountable to making these risks or taking these risks, then let's do that.
Absolutely. And when you know, that's perfect. When you know a situation is coming up where you tend to have trouble, or a conversation with someone that you tend to have trouble, whatever, the preparation can help enormously. The literal, like what you just said, writing things down, but also mental preparation. How do you want to feel instead? This visualization thing is huge. How do you want to feel? What do you want to look like when you're there? You know, what's your body posture? All of that. That can help enormously. So that's a really good point. That's perfect. All right.
And just in regards to the body position, 100% agree with you, especially in my work with people who are job searching and interviewing and things like that. The perception of body position and the feeling that it gives you in terms of confidence and positive value, it's so great. So absolutely paying attention to that body position both can be a positive inner thing, but the perception that you give off as a result, it can be equally rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. You can seem more confident or less depending what's going on.
Right.
And, you know, it's the eye contact, it's the firm handshake, it's the sitting forward and you're engaged, all of that. So that's an important, critical part. And I find, like, when I'm on, like, one thing, when I'm on the phone with someone that I need to feel more confident, whether it's a sales call or whatever, I stand up because it makes me feel stronger and more confident. So play around with this a little bit with you guys, everyone. Just, kind of play around with what makes you feel more confident. And one of the things you can do, and then we'll start moving to the last two slides here and open up the floor for questions, but also other tools that you have used for this is like the standing up, I think, can help be enormously valuable. And you need to do this on a consistent, regular basis and just play with different options and find out, what works best for you. If one thing doesn't work perfectly, try something else. So know that this is kind of a fluid process that it takes some time to work on and accomplish over time. So be patient with yourself too. So quick note about career coaching. If you need additional assistance with this or anything else regarding your career, I'd be happy to speak with you. We do have a complimentary consultation we do with prospective clients just to make sure it's the right fit and let you know what our services are so you know what you'd be signing up for. And on the last slide here, I love this image. It's so perfect. So I want you all to think about, sort of as a final question or thought here, is as a result of being here on this webinar, what will be different tomorrow as a result of today? And remember, it can be baby steps, small action steps here, but I want you all to write down from what you learned today or came up with on your own 2 action steps you will take. Go ahead and please feel free to start typing in questions and suggestions or action steps in the chat box, and Caroline will monitor those and will answer them as appropriate. But I want you to at least come up with 2 action steps in the next week, everyone, that you all will implement right away, okay? And I'll go back to, just as our close for today, the quote that Caroline mentioned that I live by in my life, because for me, stepping out of my comfort zone is a requirement being a business owner. And just remember that the greatest risk in life is not taking one. And so this is all about taking risks, everybody, but it's about taking measured, calculated, smart ones that will help move you forward in your career, okay? So thanks for being here. We'll open up the floor right now for comments or questions in the chat box. And Caroline, help me monitor. I think I can see them too, but you never know.
Okay, I am. I'm taking a look, and if anyone has any feelings on, wants to share anonymously, we won't mention names, about the ways that you experience imposter syndrome, or the way, any techniques that you will use to help control that. Or any questions that you might have.
Yeah, we'll give it a few minutes for people to tune in. It's interesting, Caroline, I'll just make a comment for everybody too, that, you know, when we start coaching with someone, regardless of what we're coaching them on, this is one of the first things that we cover and talk about. Because what I've found is the coaching is going to go nowhere if these kinds of things are in the way. And so we try to train people on overcoming and managing these obstacles first thing, because we could talk all day long about the right career path for them, but if they can't go do it because they're stuck in fear, it doesn't matter. And it impacts not just people's work performance, but people brainstorming possible career ideas and thinking outside the box. And it really can kind of stop them in their tracks, regardless of what their goal is. So it's real important at the get-go, I think. All right, are we good?
It looks like we're good. So everyone, I thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Hallie, for this very interesting presentation. We just encourage you all to take action on the information that you've gathered today in your own individual ways, and we hope to see you back for a webinar very soon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Yes, have a great weekend. Bye-bye.